Welcome to Big Band Backstage, brought to you by CP Music Productions and produced at DHB Studios in Manchester, New Hampshire. This podcast celebrates the music and the performers of today's big band scene while uncovering the unique stories behind its rich American heritage. CP Music Productions is part of the heartbeat of this movement, with two generations behind it, a father and son team of Clayton Skip Poole and his son, CJ Poole. Both join me here at DHB Studios. Skip Poole is CP Music Productions' music director. For nearly 50 years, he has led big bands and collaborated with world-class performers. And Skip, it is always nice to talk with you.
Great to be here, Laura.
And CJ Poole is a vocalist, bassist, and the business director for CP Music Productions. And CJ, always good to sit down with you too.
Likewise, thanks, Laura.
And our special guest for this episode is Vince Giordano, band leader of Vince Giordano and the Nighthawks, which specializes in the music of the 1920s and 30s. The band has won multiple Grammy Awards and has recorded the soundtracks of many hit television series and award-winning films, including Killers of the Flower Moon, The Aviator, and HBO's Boardwalk Empire. Vince himself plays multiple instruments and is a vocalist, and he and his band can be heard performing live every Monday and Tuesday night at Birdland in New York City. A native of New York himself, he joins us now from the Big Apple. And welcome, Vince, to Big Band Backstage. It's really great to have you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and Skip and CJ, and thanks so much for considering me and having me on your program.
Well,
that's wonderful.
Let's start right at the beginning, Vince. And I have read that you got your passion for the music of the 20s and 30s very early on. So how young were you, and what pulled you to this style of music?
I was 5 years old, and I used to visit my grandparents every holiday, and they had an old wind-up Victrola, which no one used anymore, but it was a treasure trove of jazz and pop music and singers for when they were married back in the 20s, 1923, the machine was from. And this was my calling. I just loved it so much. Also coming home from school, there were films on TV that were done in the early 30s, like the Little Rascals, the R Gang, the Max Fleischer cartoons, the Warner Brothers cartoons, and they always had some jazzy soundtracks in there. And this would reinforce my love for this music. Of course, I was this weird kid because none of the other friends could relate to what I was about, but it seemed perfectly normal to me.
Well, what was it that really just made you want to listen to this and keep listening for your whole career? What is it about the music that just really pulls you in, Vince?
Well, it's pretty exciting music, and harmonically, it's not as advanced, of course, as where jazz and pop music went. But at that time, the only thing we could listen to was AM pop radio. And they'd have these things like How Much Is This Doggy in the Window and Oh My Papa, which are pretty saccharine and terrible, I think. And this music was very uplifting. The 1920s music was very uplifting for me. And it just grabbed me. I don't know. I felt like I should have been back there in the 1920s.
Well, and we'll hear some examples of the music as we go along. So hold on to that thought. But Skip, how did you first meet Vince, and what is his dedication, his real dedication to this music brought to the table for you?
Well, I've always been aware of Vince and so much appreciative of what he's accomplished with his music. But I think our sort of collaboration, if you will, was in a book that Don Reno wrote, actually 2 volumes of, called Paul Whiteman, A Pioneer in American Music. And Don had asked me to go down to Boston to be on a panel with a few other people, and I got a chance to meet Al Galladoro, who was the last living member of the Whiteman Band. And from that book, I know Vince was involved in that as well, and being in the book. And we became aware of each other, I guess. And then I had heard from Vince about perhaps borrowing a piece or two of music, And I have a comparably incredibly small library as opposed to Vince, who has his immense library. And I was able to help him out with that. So we became friends via the phone and so forth, and that way, and email and so forth. So I've always been aware of Vince, but obviously just adds so much wonderful music to the scene. It's great.
Right. And we've talked about Paul Whiteman on this show many times. So just remind listeners, Skip, who Paul Whiteman was and why he's so important to our conversation, especially today.
Well, it's really amazing when you think about it, because 100 years ago, Paul Whiteman coming to any town in the country was like the Pope coming to visit.
Wow,
I mean, it was
really?
a big deal. Towns shut down, keys to the city were made. I mean, it was a big, big deal. And he was the biggest thing in pop music at the time, early jazz, if you will. And a lot of wonderful, incredible stars over the years went through his organization. The Dorseys and Jack Teagarden, and the list goes on and on. But he was the quintessential person for that kind of music during the 1920s.
Wow. Well, CJ, I want to pull you in here, and we're going to talk about Vince's amazing career. He's gained so much respect and admiration for his devotion to the real authenticity of the 20s and 30s jazz. And we're definitely going to talk about that. But as a vocalist, CJ, how do you approach performing this music with that commitment to authenticity in mind?
Yeah. When you start kind of looking at the earlier jazz and that period of music, originally it was very much instrumental first, vocal second. So a lot of these early recordings, you'll hear these wonderful arrangements of tunes that people would grow to love, but there might only be just one chorus of vocals.
Oh, I did not know that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you're listening to like Bing Crosby, performing some of this earlier stuff with Paul Whiteman and so forth, but the interpretation is such that Bing was really the pioneer in vocal jazz, like Whiteman was the pioneer in instrumental. He really trailblazed the interpretation of that music, and what made it so unique was kind of his swinging. It was still, very much on top of the beat, very staccato and punctuated, but he just swung it in such a way that no one else had done before. Because you're coming from a time where a lot of these vocalists were coming from a classical background, and then making that shift, Bing really kind of made it his own.
Oh, I see. So it was a real transition for performers
at
that time. So when you're singing it, CJ, how do you try to pay tribute to that authenticity?
Well, I think it's just playing true to the music. Listening to it and deciphering the interpretational difference between, let's say, Bing Crosby and then, like a Frank Sinatra, who idolized Bing. It's two completely different things. And really what it shows is the natural general progression of the music over the decades. Listening to that early 20s period stuff and singing it is much different than I would approach, say Sinatra or Nat King Cole or Mel Torme. And really it's just a matter of listening to the music and getting, honing in that interpretation from listening.
Wow, it's so interesting. Vince, I know authenticity is really important to you. Talk about that, please. What authenticity means and why you're so committed to it.
Well, thank goodness that we have these old 78 RPM records to listen to, because they are really Rosetta Stones to tell us, or let us hear how musicians phrased and played, how singers stuck within what I call a little square box. They didn't get out of the box too much. And to me, I want to recreate this music as it was played back then. It's almost like going to a symphony orchestra and hearing a Mozart concerto or Beethoven. I mean, it's pretty much the same music that's been around for hundreds of years, maybe a little faster here, a little slower here. That's interpretation. That's fine. But there's nothing that really that sticks out that says, wow, that was really wrong. Everyone sticks to the score. And I have, there's a lot of people who have criticized me for doing so over the years, and that's okay, and Edward G. Robbins says, yeah, you can dish it out, but you can't take it. Well, I can take it. So this is my band, and this is what I want to do. Right. And to me, when people played jazz back then, whether it was Louis Armstrong or Benny Goodman or Bing Crosby or Bix Beiderbecke, they played their own solos. But the way I look at it, they were sort of mini compositions. These were compositions, and people over the years have copied those solos and memorized them. And then, of course, they play their own solos and other things. But I wanted to play those solos that I heard from back in the 20s and 30s today, in today's format. So you didn't have to go back to a 78 RPM disc sounding. It's live. It's a composition. And we get a lot of critics and a lot of musicians who shake their finger at me. I said, that's fine.
Well, your devotion to authenticity is clearly working for you because you keep getting asked to do movies and TV shows and so forth. So someone wants you to recreate that music exactly as it was, Vince.
Oh, yeah. When we did Boardwalk Empire and The Aviator, I was sent these little files in email of 78 RPM recording performances. And they said, we want this.
Right.
Everything, even the solos.
Yeah.
The only thing I would change sometimes if they had a different singer who preferred a different key. Like we worked with Marco Bingham, a wonderful lady singer. So we had to change her keys to match a performance that was done by a male singer and vice versa.
Skip, could you weigh in, please, on the importance of interpreting the music in an authentic way? I'm especially interested since you're a band leader. So,
well, I think that's so terribly important. The interpretation of what anything that an orchestra plays, and that's not just a, jazz orchestra, symphony orchestra, whatever, the interpretive aspect of what they perform is a big part of what people are hearing, obviously. And I think to be true to the original concept of what was written is very important. And I used to, in my mind, equate it to, if you were able to go in a time machine and go back and experience what it might have been like to see Paul Whiteman live on stage and hear what it actually sounded like, and not a scratchy 78, but the real sound. The goal was to recreate that as much as possible, including the solos. And that way, it's sort of like having Bix Beiderbecke in the room, and listening to what was happening and how it fit into the overall composition, and it wasn't at all unusual in the big band era, per se, that band leaders insisted that soloists play the solo that they just played on the recording. And, I've talked to people over the years that have had experienced that with certain band leaders, and we wanted to make sure that was the same. So it becomes, their solo essentially becomes part of the compositional context of that arrangement. So to isolate it and play a different kind of thing sometimes becomes very disappointing to the listener that's expecting to hear a certain thing played. And on several occasions, certain musicians might not want to play within that context. And so if they play something a bit more from their background, it's more out of context from the original intent of the composition. So by being able to interpret it, or the early interpretations, be correct in that, and play those early solos, it's very true to the original intent, and it sounds much more like a full composition the way it was intended.
Well, and I've always been fascinated by the idea of if I could go back in time, I would visit this or watch this. So I love the idea of just being able to enter that world.
Yeah, and that's the idea, just to sit there and experience what it would have been like. And frankly, when people go to hear Beethoven or any of these symphonies, that's the same concept, really. It's listening to that material. It's going to be subtle differences. Again, we go back to interpretation, depending on the conductor and how he interprets a Beethoven piece. But for the most part, they're going to get what's written on the page and what was intended.
Well, to get an idea, let's hear a clip of the tune Going to Town from one of Vince's most recent albums with his group, the Nighthawks.
All you hoofers, grab your shoes, grab away those doggone blues. Yes, sir, 'cause we're going to town. Listen to me and don't lag. There's a hot time in the bag. Yes, sir, 'cause we're going to town. Old folks, young folks, gather round. There's nothing to learn. Better turn your dappers down. Make sure your feet don't burn. Hurry up, no time to wait. Everybody's syncopate. Yes, sir, 'cause we're going to town.
All right, so that was Vince Giordano's The Nighthawks playing Going to Town. And there is something about that music, Vince. We're all sitting in here in the studio with huge smiles on our faces now. And CJ, what does that music mean to you? What stands out for you from that clip? We all just look so happy hearing it.
Yeah, it's jubilant. If you're listening to that music and you're not tapping your feet, then check your pulse. It radiates just excitement at the highest level and musicianship at the highest level, because the band is spectacular as always. But the music itself is so exciting because it's so multidimensional. In that, you know, you have the horns, you have the punchy rhythm, you know, and then of course the vocals, and it's just there's nothing else like that era of music.
Yeah.
There just isn't. I don't know how else to put it myself, but it's just a great genre.
As I said, we're all sitting in here with huge grins on our faces.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Skip. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't think people realize that what you've just heard is not easy to do.
Yeah.
You know, people today, for the most part, don't hear a lot of that kind of music. So, you know, for musicians, and I've experienced this with top pro musicians, it becomes very difficult. We spend a lot of rehearsal, you know, just going over how to approach that music, you know, on top of the time and listen to this. You know, the interpretive aspects are completely different than some of the more modern pieces. But what you listened to was the fine art of music making, and done well, there isn't anything more exciting. And when you realize that, you know, that's what it was. I mean, you can't help but tap your feet and listen. You feel happy, and it was happy music. And to play it well and translate that to other people, I mean, it's just it's amazing on that high of a level. It's just wonderful.
And it is amazing that they were able to create that, because when you think about where people were at during that time, they just came out of a world war, a pandemic. And so there's the music making people smile and say, you know, let's keep going. Vince, we talked about Paul Whiteman earlier, and I wonder who else from this era are role models for you?
Oh my, there are thousands. I couldn't talk and tell you all of them. And if I mention a few, people will say, how come you didn't mention this person? But, you know, there's the early days of Fletcher Henderson and the California Ramblers, of course, Bix and his gang, early Duke Ellington, the Casa Loma Band, the Benny Moten Band. I mean, there's hundreds of wonderful bands that, thank goodness, they got into the studios and made recordings.
Yeah, thank goodness that we did have that technology from that time so that we can listen and interpret. Others that either of you gentlemen would add to that list, role models, Skip, from this era.
I mean, you know,
thousands like Vince, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, of course, you know, Louis Armstrong and his Hot 5 and 7, Fletcher Henderson, huge, Benny Goodman, early on in the 30s, you know, Don Redman, the Whiteman or aggregation was just an amazing thing. The spinoffs from that. I mean, there was so much going on musically, and to think, and I keep telling myself this, but it's so true. We're only talking 100 years ago, and so much has changed. Not necessarily for the better. I remember the comment, I think it was Bing Crosby, that said, the music business, this is back, I think, in 1969, the music business is the only business in the world that takes 3 steps forward and 10 back every year.
Oh, dear.
So that was his lament on where things are at in 1969. I don't know what he would think today, but you know, it was so much excitement going on. Anytime you listen to the music of that period, you just walk away thinking, wow, listen to that.
Yeah.
You know, it's just exciting music.
CJ, do you want to jump in there? Your favorites from this era? either among those that Vince and Skip have listed or your own favorites?
Well, I think they covered quite a few of the heavy hitters for sure. But of course, as we mentioned before, Bing Crosby, huge influence on me as a vocalist. And, also some of the other players that originated in the Whiteman band, but, kind of grew into their own fame in their own right. Obviously, the Dorsey brothers, Jack Teagarden, and a lot of these guys really got their roots early on with this music. And what is wonderful to see is the growth that occurred over the following decades, because those are the roots, and then it blossomed into what was well known as the traditional big band era, the World War II years, and then beyond.
And of course the Ellingtonians,
Yeah.
But Duke Ellington, and I think we had Brian Davis on recently, who plays with the current Duke Ellington band, and it's like the oldest, longest running band from back then till today,
Right.
run by the family.
Yeah.
So it's amazing, really. But it was such a great period of music, and thank heavens that Vince keeps it going.
Right.
Because it's where can you go to hear this music, performed at such a high level?
Well, speaking of amazing, Vince, I was amazed that you play string bass, tuba, bass sax, but also banjo, guitar, piano, and drums, and you sing. What a joy it must be to express yourself musically in so many ways. How do you think that wide array of musical abilities has shaped you, Vince, as a composer, as an arranger, as a band leader?
Well, playing those different instruments, of course, I used to play them more. I'm sort of, cutting down as time moves on. But you sort of know the limitations of the instrument, and you know what you want. Like being a drummer of sorts, I can instruct my drummers who come in sometimes as substitutes. Here, try this. Play like this. I don't want Buddy Rich or Gene Krupa on a 1924 piece of music, and with a choke cymbal or woodblock and things like that, and particularly with banjo and guitar. It's an old language that I'm trying to teach these younger players. People played differently back then. People spoke differently back then. Watch old movies back then. They moved faster. Everything was a different set of beats in 100 years ago. And so it's hard for people to relate to this. And as was said before, to get the people to play this music, you really have to embrace it and love it. And it has to become part of yourself, in your heart and your mind, and of course in your chops. The chops is whether you blow a saxophone or a trumpet or a trombone, and it's you have to have some sort of dedication.
How long have the Nighthawks been playing, Vince?
Over 40 years.
Wow.
Almost 50. It started with a guy out of Fordham University, a guy named Rich Conity, who was a radio DJ, not a musician, and he decided to start a band with Paul Whiteman charts, of all things. And Rich was a dear friend. He's not with us anymore, but he really didn't know anything about music. And he had these 23, 24-piece arrangements, and only 5 or 6 people would show up to play. And we kind of got together, and I said, I think we have to go another way. And that's how it started. He was the front man, and I was just back in the back counting off the tempos. And then over the years, it became the Nighthawks.
Wow. Has the band changed over the years?
Oh,
Vince?
yeah.
Yeah?
In the original years, Rich and I would try to get musicians who played in the 20s and 30s. We could do this 40 some odd years ago.
Oh, I see. The original people from those original
we
bands.
Had Clarence Hutchinwright from the Casa Loma band, who started in the 20s. We had Big Jim Maxwell, who used to play with Benny Goodman. Trumpet, Bernie Priven, who was the hot man in the Artie Shaw band. You could see him on those Vitaphone shorts that had been reissued. And on and on and on. And everybody was sort of like early 70s to 80s, and I was 24, 25 years old. So I learned a lot from those guys. But over the years, folks, have left. They retired, they passed on. But playing in a certain club, we'd have younger musicians come in and experience it. And I said, I'd like to try to play in this band and substitute. And some worked out and some didn't.
Yeah. Wow. How exciting to be able to play with those icons from the past.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the Nighthawks, let's see a little bit of the Nighthawks performing live now.
For anything more, I got daisies in green pastures. I got my girl who could ask for anything more. Old man trouble, I don't mind him. You won't find him round my door. I got starlight, I got sweet dreams. I got my girl who could ask for anything more. Who could ask for anything more.
Wow. That was the Nighthawks there playing I've Got Rhythm. As we said earlier, the group plays regularly in New York City and has for years. Vince, how would you describe audiences for this music? Who's coming to your performances at Birdland in New York, and what do you think they're seeking?
Okay. Before I address that, I just want to say that little performance which was not one of my best vocal performances. I'm sorry, but we did that at Rich Connedy's memorial. That's where that was.
I
just
see.
to kind of tie that together.
Yeah.
The folks that come to Birdland are, I would say, a different bunch of folks than folks that used to come and see us at other venues, mainly because in the earlier years we had a lot of locals. Folks at Birdland seem to be from around the world, tourists who come to Birdland because Birdland's been around for 75 years now. So they want to hear jazz, and there's lots of different kinds of jazz at Birdland, from ragtime to no time, so to speak. And so they come in, and some folks know what we're about, and some are pleasantly surprised that we're playing jazz of 100 years ago.
Yeah. How about your audiences here in New England, Skip? What do you think your big band audiences are seeking when they come to one of your concerts?
Well, I've always taken the road that, our goal is to entertain the audience, and versus trying to educate them. I really think that, audiences pay tickets to come and hear you and want to be entertained. And I think we do educate them, but we do it in a fun way. A lot of our things that we do, we try to have a special event, meaning a tribute to maybe Benny Goodman, or a tribute to something like that, or have a motif that's tied into. So they come expecting a certain kind of music. But the average demographic is, it used to be broader than it is currently. And it's now you see a lot of older folks come in. You see some young people too. When we did the tour down through Florida with Ken Poplowski in a tribute to the Benny Goodman's 38 Carnegie Hall show, it was interesting because that demographic was completely different. There were far more young people, and they would come up during intermission and, we want to meet with Ken or buy a CD or something. That was a completely different group of people than local, which I thought was kind of interesting. But
Yeah.
for the most part, they come knowing the kind of music. And the one thing that struck me is that most of them, especially young people, we'd always hear the comment, they'd never heard anything like this. or they couldn't believe all the people on the stage making music because they're used to a small rock band or something. And even the comments on YouTube, if you Google "Sing, Sing, Sing," for example, things that I found were comments like, "I'm a metalhead, but I love this music," or "I was born at the wrong time," or "Where can I hear more of this music?" So it becomes
That's encouraging.
Well, it becomes a challenge of an outlet. I think there's a real want to hear this music out there, but how can you get it out there? And that's really the challenge.
Did you want to jump in, CJ, too, on that?
Yeah,
I know we've talked about this before. The dance concerts, for example, that you guys do, those bring out a variety of ages.
Yeah, certainly. It's funny. For years, I always thought to myself that I was born in the wrong era. I was born 100 years too late. But as I get a little bit older and I start to have the experiences that I do now, I start to think to myself, maybe I was born at the right time.
Right. Maybe this is your mission.
To kind of carry the torch with this great music. There's a few people that I know, younger generations that are very much, fully enveloped in this music from a performance standpoint. And I think it's so vitally important to, keep it going, keep it alive. And, by doing so, hopefully we can continue to garner interest and attract younger audiences to these shows. And I think what's really encouraging is when we do perform, what I've noticed, there seems to, we have, the regular, call them blue hairs that we've always had, right? But it's exciting to start to see some younger people coming. And I think it's so exposing them, the earlier the better, because everyone we talk to, and Vince included on this podcast episode, when we ask, what got you, when did you start getting into this music? Everyone always says, they were like 5, 6 years old.
Right.
That's when I got into it.
And I'm just going to add that I don't care if they're 5 or 105. We're so very grateful for each and every one of them showing up to buying a ticket to come hear us.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you for offering me the perfect segue for my next question that I wanted to ask Vince, because as we talk about reaching different audiences, Vince, you've been a part of that, recording music for award-winning films, TV series. Let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, how is performing music for the screen different than, sitting down with your band at a club like Birdland?
Well, doing films, you have a lot of people listening in and criticizing, whether it's the producer, the director, the music people, the recording engineer.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so you're going to have to, let's try and let her be different. Let's try it a little faster, a little slower, multiple takes. And when you're performing live, that's it. You're out there. And if it's a little fast or a little slow or somebody makes a little blip, we have to go with it. And so it's less demanding, so to speak, even though we try to keep our standards up. But to err is human, and there you be. But trying to get more young people introduced to this music. I speak every night at the end of my show. Thanks for coming. Thanks for supporting live music. Let's try to introduce some young people to live music, whether it's a cabaret, a jazz event, even a parade. It's live music. Young people have to see that it's not pushing a button on a computer. There's actual people creating it. And that's the only way we're going to survive, whether it's the stuff that we do or classical music or opera or Broadway. We have to show young people what it's about.
Well, we could probably talk for another half hour about the many films and TV shows that you've worked on, Vince, that have featured your music. But which ones have been most enjoyable for you? Which ones have been standouts?
Well, there's been quite a few. It's really hard for me to I'm just going to tell you a quick, fast story. My first film that I did with Dick Hyman is a Woody Allen film called Zelig. And I was just part of the band, and we were doing a track, and lady was singing. I had no idea who this lady was. And I'm sitting here with my headphones on and playing the tuba, and it's really driving me crazy. I know this voice. So I asked Dick Hyman, I said, where's the singer? Oh, she's in the recording booth there. So I knocked on the door, come on in. And there she was. And I'd love to meet you. What's your name? And her name was Mae Questel. and Mae Questel was the original voice for Betty Boop.
Oh my
And
goodness.
this is a throwback that when I was a kid watching the Betty Boop, so I'm hearing the same inflections. Boop, boop, beep, if she hit that octave up there. So that was fantastic. I always want to share that story.
Oh, that's great.
Probably the Boardwalk Empire series. It was 5 years. There was so much attention to detail about the music and how it was to be played. It was like going into a time machine. The automobiles, the acting, the clothing. It was so great, and that influenced a lot of people. And I think we have a lot of younger people sort of doing a little renaissance for early music at this point from the Boardwalk. You hear a lot of people talk about Prohibition Night. Prohibition Night. I don't think they even know what Prohibition Night was or is. But let's do a Prohibition Night.
Sure.
Okay, So it's been good.
Yeah.
I got a lot of younger guys in my band who I said, "Where were you 40 years when I started?" Well, they weren't born yet. So.
Oh, well, it must have been a thrill for you to participate in that, to be like immersed in that scenery with the cars and the clothes and everything else.
Top notch.
One of the films that you're most known for creating the music is the 2004 Martin Scorsese motion picture, The Aviator. So I'd like to share a little bit of that recording now. And CJ, again, we could have done a whole episode just on what Vince and the Nighthawks have done on the screen, both the small screen and the big screen. But how meaningful do you think it is, CJ, for this music to be displayed so widely to film and TV audiences?
Well, I think, going forward, it's going to always serve as a time capsule. Film lasts forever, and
people are discovering films all the time.
Yeah. I mean, everyone, and what I love is that Vince has been in so many different things that will always be out there for people to, eventually, stumble upon and maybe just pique their interest enough to dig a little deeper and find out more. And I just think it's a marvelous thing. And what I really appreciate about the movies that have had Vince, perform the music for is that they've stayed true to the authenticity of the music, given the time period.
Sure, as we talked about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, because, you've seen, there's been sometimes different movies where they have a period piece, but the musical element it's missing. It's not the authentic sound. And everything that Vince does in these movies, it shows. It's just incredible.
It's the real deal. Skip, do you want to jump in?
No, I mean, I just think it's certainly, I guess you could call it, sort of a time capsule going forward. But more importantly, bravo to the producers who, will say we're going to do a period piece, and oh, by the way, let's have period music. There's nothing more disturbing to me when I go to see a movie, whether it be Gatsby or some other movie, and I'm going to expecting to see, and I look at all the money and everything they put into the props and the cars and the clothes, and then I hear twanging electric guitars and rock drums and everything. What are they thinking?
The time capsule has exploded.
The greater problem with that is I think the audiences of today don't necessarily know that there's anything wrong with that because they're not exposed to a lot of this early material and music so it's a lost opportunity, in other words. But when you sync the two together, it's like a fine dining. It comes together. The palette is perfect, and I just don't understand why pictures are done like that. So I'm excited, beyond excited, to see things that Vince has done, and to promote not only the movie, but more importantly, in my mind, the music.
Right. Well, and Vince, given your long and full career, you told us that you now have an enormous library of music. How big is it? And what's unique about it?
Okay. Well, one of the unique things, how big it is. I have 60,000 band arrangements and about I think it's 24,000 or 30,000, I forget, sheet music, piano sheet music. And these are things that I've picked up over the years, advertising, cleaning out attics and basements. I cleaned out 3 old theaters, one in Buffalo and one in St. Louis and one in New Jersey that had the old music still there from the 20s when they needed music for acts and music for silent picture performances.
Wow, that's incredible. What a treasure trove.
Yeah, it is, I think. And eventually it's going to go to a couple of universities. Not that I was involved with these universities. They contacted me and they said, what are you going to do with this music when you go to the big bandstand? I said, I don't know. So hopefully that's going to happen, and they won't change administrations and have a weird feeling about we don't want this anymore. Because that happens. Some universities that I've dealt with, they said, well, nobody's playing this music. It hasn't been called up, so we're going to let it go. I said, well, I'll take it, and so you just don't know what the future is about, but I try.
So right now, anyway, there's a couple universities, Vince, that are interested in taking on this this music for their libraries.
Right now, about 13,000 stock arrangements to North Texas State, and they're all cataloged there. I catalog them first so that because that's the main thing. When people get donations, they say, oh, it's going to take so long to write it up. No, I have a fast way to do it, and it's all cataloged. And the rest of the stuff is going to University of Mississippi. They have a large sheet music collection, but they don't have anything in orchestrations.
Wow. Skip, you have a large library yourself. What's the importance of having these originals, these pieces of paper?
Well, first of all, in comparison, mine's about maybe 10 or 12% as opposed to what Vince had. But, I've often said if I hadn't been a musician, I would have been a historian, because I love the history that goes on behind the music. And I've been fortunate enough to spend a good deal of time at Williams College, at the Paul Whiteman Archives, and also at Yale with the Benny Goodman Archives, and a little bit in Arizona with the Shaw collection. So, what's nice is touching this music, being able to play music that has, in some of the early material, instead of an instrument on the page, it simply says Bix or J. Dorsey or something. And on the back, I'll never forget, I was looking at one piece of music in the library, and it was actually Tommy Dorsey was sitting behind him, and he was writing a note on the back. We're heading to Chicago next, and I'm told we got to check out this Delmonico's Steakhouse or something. And it was a note to his brother.
Wow.
But it was on the back of the music. And you'll have a lot of, there's a lot of history in the music. And I really enjoy that part of it. And the other piece of it, of course, is that you can't get more authentic than to actually have the materials that was being played. So when you listen to the recordings and you say, gee, they're playing this recording, but they're playing it from the music I'm looking at in my hand. So you can really get a lot of interpretive expertise that way.
Right.
And I will say, we'll go back to the interpretive thing. It really isn't taught today. So even, as I've said, with professionals who come in to do a show and it's of that period, a good amount of time is spent just on the interpretation of the material. But a great class, and unless maybe it is somewhere, I hope so. A great class would be on the university level, different interpretation over the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, right through, and how orchestras interpreted music, because that's a huge opportunity for musicians to learn how to do that, and they just don't, unless they go out into a band like Vince's, and on the job they have to figure it out and learn it and so forth. But musicians just don't come in knowing or having a rough idea of how to do it. But having that original music to me, was so terribly important to reproduce it. I'm not a big fan of, lifts, if you will, or transcriptions. I mean, in some cases you have to have some of that, but to be able to have the actual material, the actual music stamped by the orchestra or written on, or even in some cases with Fletcher Henderson, most of his stuff was handwritten, the original material, and so you were actually playing the parts that Fletcher wrote out.
Yeah, that's a really meaningful connection to that music. Did you want to jump in, CJ, there on that point? Because I have one question that kind of for you that kind of relates to something that both Vince and Skip said.
Sure.
And that is our earlier part of this discussion about getting younger generations involved with this music. We've talked about it some, but without sort of lamenting that fewer young people are listening, what are your ideas, CJ and Skip and Vince, for getting younger generations tied into this music?
Well, I think you have to get with the times, which is what actually jump-started our efforts in creating this podcast. You know, if we want to get in front of younger people, we got to find a way to do so through the outlets that they are listening to and watching. So
you have to go where their eyes and ears are.
Yeah, and what you're competing against isn't necessarily the different music of today, because I think if certain people are really looking for something, you know, they're going to veer away from what they might hear on the radio. But what I think you need to figure out is a way to compete against the constant new, you know, things that are happening all the time on social media. So just trying to branch out and, you know, connect with them through social media and, you know, obviously on TV as much as, you know, as possible.
Yeah, and you're involved in some of those
television.
efforts, social media, this podcast, and so forth. So
yeah, and
you're
then
trying.
Trying, and then just continuing to perform live, and you know, getting the word out. And every time we have a show, we always say something to the effect of, you know, we couldn't do this without your patronage. We greatly appreciate you supporting this live music, but next time, please, you know, bring your grandkids, bring your kids kicking and screaming, and get them in here to hear it. And it makes a big difference. So I think, you know, that's all.
I used to put little candies in my purse. That was my way. When the kids are little, I'd, you know, give them a little mint or a chocolate or something. It worked. Vince, how about you? Without, you know, lamenting that younger people aren't coming, what ideas do you have for exposing them and getting them excited about this music?
Well, I'll tell you a happy story / sad story all in one real quick. In 2004, we got asked to perform with Cole Porter. And it was 2 tracks that he did back in 1934, Anything Goes and You're the Top. He was at the piano, and we went into the BMG studios, and we put some background music. And it was still the Cole Porter disc, and it came out. And I think we did a pretty good job on it. And I thought that was the end of it. Unbeknownst to me, those 2 tracks were sold to a kids game called BioShock. And unfortunately, we never received a penny. But I'm told this BioShock game was a real big hit with a lot of vintage music on it. And so even though we did not get the money that we were supposed to get for secondary usage,
right,
I feel good that thousands of kids are listening to Cole Porter singing You're the Top and Anything Goes with the Nighthawks back there. And you could hear it online.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. So, and I also, my big desire is to somehow get this music on PBS and for a young kids program, so that when young little, what we call rugrats or toddlers, turn on the TV, they can hear some of this stuff, and it becomes part of their being. So when they hear it later as older kids, older people, they said, "Oh, I remember that music from that show."
Right. Well, it certainly has the energy levels of, you know, young children, toddlers. I can picture them, you know, being drawn in by that.
Yeah.
Skip, I'm going to give you the last word actually on this. Getting younger generations tied into this music like Vince was at 5 years old, as he told us.
Well, I mean, clearly it's all about exposure. And that's what we have the lack of today. So the real focus should be exposure, whether it be, you know, elementary kids and, you know, music in schools, being able to hear this music performed. I think it's great to, you know, you want to support live music, which we really need to do. Bring your kids. It's exciting music. You know, there's YouTube now. You can search it on YouTube. There's social media. Kids, hey, out there listening to this podcast, eventually let us know, if you'd like to come to a show or support something. We really want to have, and again, I say not just the young kids, but, the people in general. It's such wonderful music. It needs to be listened to. And I've yet to see anybody listening to a performance of this music that, it's usually a dark theater. I don't necessarily see all the feet tapping, but I see the smiles. And the smiles on people's faces usually isn't associated with anything negative. So, we need to have more of this. Through the venues that I've mentioned, and hopefully at some point it'll take on a bigger track. Let's hope.
Well, we could talk a lot longer, but those are some good ideas. So we've got to start. We've got to start here.
We do.
Absolutely.
We do have to wrap it up there. It's been really fun to talk to you. And CJ, thank you. Always good to be with you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
That's CJ Poole. He's a vocalist, bassist, and business director for CP Music Productions. Skip, always good to be with you.
Great to be here.
That's Clayton Skip Poole, music director for CP Music Productions. And a big thank you to our special guest today, Vince Giordano, band leader of the Nighthawks, which, as we said, has won multiple Grammy Awards, recorded the soundtracks of TV series, award-winning films, and once again, you can catch them performing live at Birdland in New York City every Monday and Tuesday night. Vince, what a treat to talk to you and just hear about your career. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks so much,
Thank you
Vince.
so much. Thanks for having me. All the best.
It's been great.
Keep up
Thank
the great
you.
work.
Thanks,
Keep
Vince.
up the great work.
This episode wraps up the 2025 season for Big Band Backstage, but stay tuned because there'll be more great conversations about great music coming up next year. Meanwhile, we hope that you enjoyed these 6 episodes and that you'll share them with your friends, whatever their age, and fellow musicians. Well, to learn more about CP Music Productions, their upcoming performances, and the big band music movement in general, sign up for their newsletter at cplivemusic.com. Once again, that's cplivemusic.com. They are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube with the handle at CP Live Music Official. Once again, that's at CP Live Music Official. This podcast can be found on the YouTube channel and also on Spotify. The theme for Big Band Backstage was written by Jerry Ascione. Many thanks to DHB Studios for producing these podcasts. And that's it for today. I'm Laura Canoy. Please join us next time on Big Band Backstage.